So, welcome back to the Bitcoin ecosystem, where we break down Bitcoin from first principles and understand how it really works. In episode 1, we talked about why Bitcoin is best understood as an ecosystem, not just a piece of code or a coin. Today, we're going to dive deep into the historical backdrop whereby Bitcoin emerged in the first place. So, we're going to step back, talk about why Bitcoin was created, how central banks and traditional currencies work, and why this new digital paradigm is such a radical departure from centuries of financial history. And so, again, just a little bit of a disclaimer, this is my book, but again, in 2025, we are still very early. Bitcoin's global adoption is estimated at just 3%. And that's where online banking was in 1996, where social media was in 2005, and where the internet itself was in the 1990s. And this graph, this chart is the reason I'm going to do this podcast series and continue to do so, because we are still crawling along the bottom. We have yet to hit the inflection point. We've yet to hit the point where adoption goes exponential. That hasn't even happened yet. So this is the chart I'm going to bring up again and again. So great innovations often rise from the ashes of disaster, right? Economist Joseph Schumpeter called this process creative destruction. Old systems fail, and from that failure, new ideas emerge. And for Bitcoin, the catalyst was the 2008 global financial crisis. And it is under this exact backdrop of financial chaos and broken trust that Bitcoin emerged. Bitcoin was born as a direct response to a world where centralized financial authorities, banks, credit rating agencies, governments had failed. So let's rewind. So for years, banks bundled risky subprime mortgages into complex financial instruments like mortgage-backed securities, MBS, and collateralized debt obligations, CDOs. These instruments became so complex that even the banks themselves often didn't fully understand the risks. Centralized credit rating agencies like Standard & Poor's, Moody's stamped these toxic products with AAA ratings, giving them quite a false sense of safety. So when that housing bubble burst, the entire system unraveled. Banks failed, governments scrambled to issue bailouts, and ordinary people, homeowners, workers, retirees, were left to deal with that fallout. So trust in centralized finance was shattered. And it is under this backdrop of the 2008 financial crisis that Bitcoin emerged. A lot of people don't know this. And this is very important to understand. This was not a coincidence. Bitcoin was designed as a direct response to a world where centralized financial authorities, banks, credit rating agencies, and governments had failed. So on January 3rd, 2009, I should say, the first ever Bitcoin block, known as the Genesis block, was quietly mined. Bitcoin was launched to really no fanfare or hype. And Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, embedded a now famous message in its first Genesis Bitcoin block. And the message read something like this: "The Times, 03 Jan 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." That was the message encoded in the first Bitcoin block. And this was the exact headline from the British newspaper, The Times, published the same day. It referred to the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Alistair Darling's imminent approval of basically yet another round of bank bailouts, transferring taxpayer money to failing financial institutions. So this was not a coincidence. It was a statement. It was Satoshi's way of marking the historical moment, anchoring Bitcoin's birth to the financial crisis that inspired it. But it was also a deliberate critique, a subtle protest against the failures of the existing financial system. Bitcoin wasn't just a new kind of money, it was an alternative, a way to transact, store value, and build trust without relying on the very centralized institutions that had caused damage. The Genesis block's message is a reminder of Bitcoin's core philosophy: no bailouts, no central banks, no political manipulation, just code math, and a decentralized network of peers agreeing on a certain set of rules. So, to appreciate Bitcoin, you have to understand why centralization is even a problem. At the heart of most modern economies, of course, are central banks. Their job, in theory, is to keep the economy stable. And they do this by controlling two main levers. Number one, the money supply, so deciding how much currency circulates. And number two, interest rates, controlling how expensive it is to borrow money. When interest rates go up, borrowing becomes expensive. People spend less and the economy slows. When rates drop, borrowing gets cheaper, spending increases, and the economy heats up. But here's the thing, a central bank is the ultimate trusted authority. Every transaction in the economy is indirectly shaped by its decisions. And when central banks or governments mismanage these levers, entire nations suffer. And the question arises, why should ordinary citizens, people who just want to save and transact, get ahead, build a future, why should they pay for bad monetary policies or political decisions? And that's the question that Bitcoin sets to answer. So the question could be, well, how does centralization really affect you? You might be asking, it doesn't really affect me. The decisions of a central bank or a government really feel so far removed from my day-to-day life, right? But here's the truth. Central bank decisions hit you where it hurts most, your purchasing power. So look at this chart of global inflation rates for April 2025. Argentina is running at 47%. Good grief. Turkey is nearly at 38%, and even supposedly stable economies like the US are facing persistent inflation pressures. But here's the kicker. The official consumer price index, CPI in the US, might only really have a reading of 3 to 4%. But if you account for real currency debasement, the effective erosion of your purchasing power is closer to 11% per year. So what does that mean for you? It means that if you want to simply keep your wealth from shrinking, you need to outperform an 11% hurdle rate every single year with your investments. And if you don't, you're effectively getting poorer, even if you think you're saving. So why does this happen? Inflation isn't just a random force of nature, of course. It's largely a product of central bank policy. And here's how the cycle works. Governments run deficits. They pay for things like militaries and healthcare and infrastructure and social programs. They issue debt through government bonds. Central banks step in. They print money or use newly created reserves to buy that debt, keeping borrowing costs artificially low. And unlike a corporation or a household, which must balance its budget, a government with a central bank doesn't have to. It can always issue more currency to refinance existing debt, a process known as the debt refinance cycle. And every time that happens, the money supply expands and the value of the currency you hold in your bank account actually gets chipped away year after year. So unless you're investing at returns that exceed this silent debasement rate, you are losing wealth in real terms. And that's why understanding Bitcoin matters, because it was designed to exist outside of this endless cycle of money printing and debt refinancing. Its supply is fixed. There are no bailouts. There's no manipulation. There's no central authority deciding to debase it. So this slide shows the 5 major waves of currency evolution, a journey that spans now several thousands of years. We started with a barter economy, the earliest form of trade where goods and services were exchanged directly. Around 1200 BC, physical tokens like shells or metal coins emerged, making trade a little bit more efficient. By 618 AD, we had the first recorded use of paper money in China, a revolutionary step in portability and divisibility. Fast forward to 1861, we entered the age of electronic money with telegraphs, bank transfers, and eventually credit cards. But during this time, currencies were still tied to something tangible. From 1914 to 1944, most countries operated under the gold standard, where every unit of currency was backed by physical gold. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system, and that existed from 1944 to 1971, pegged global currencies against the US dollar, which was still redeemable in gold until 1971 when President Nixon ended that convertibility. So from that point forward, we moved fully into an era of fiat money, where currency's value is purely based on a government decree and trust in central banks. And now in 2009, we see the rise of the fifth wave, cryptocurrencies. And unlike fiat currencies, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not backed by governments or central banks. Instead, they're secured by mathematics, cryptography, and decentralized consensus. So this timeline isn't just a history, it's also a story of increasing abstraction of value, from physical goods to promises, and now to pure digital trust. And Bitcoin is that next step in this evolution. So what is currency really? So switching gears a bit, and before we define Bitcoin, we need to define currency. Currency is just a medium of exchange, a tool to trade goods, services, or financial assets. And historically, it replaced the inefficiency of barter systems. But for any currency to work, there needs to be three key traits. Number one, a store of value. People must trust that it holds worth. Number two, a medium of exchange. People must be able to trade it easily. And number three, portability and divisibility. You must be able to carry and divide it. Modern currencies like the US dollar or euro are fiat currencies, meaning they have no intrinsic value. Their value depends entirely on government policies and the people trust in them. So let's talk a little bit about fiat currency, because understanding fiat is key to understanding why Bitcoin matters. And the word fiat itself comes from the Latin meaning let it be done, essentially an order or decree. And that's exactly what fiat money is. It's government issued currency that has value because the government says it does, and because we collectively agree to accept it as legal tender. So, unlike earlier forms of money, fiat isn't backed by anything tangible, not gold, not silver, not any other commodity. Its value comes entirely from trust in the government issuing it, and trust in the central bank managing it. The problem is, governments can print more fiat at will, basically devaluing the currency over time. And the history is full of examples where fiat systems have collapsed under inflation or mismanagement. And Bitcoin was designed as a direct contrast to fiat, a currency with a fixed supply, no central authority, and no ability for it to be inflated away by decree. And with all of this historical and financial context, this is the world into which Bitcoin was born. So, out of the chaos of the 2008 financial crisis, the very first Genesis block was mined, marking the launch of the Bitcoin blockchain and a new era of money. Now, if you really want to understand Bitcoin at its core, there is one document I strongly recommend you read. And if you don't grasp every technical detail, that's okay. Just read it anyways. And that's the original Bitcoin white paper. It's only 8 pages long, really 9 pages if you include the references. So it's very, very efficient. And you can find it at bitcoin.org. The author, under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, even included their original email address. But this paper itself is where it all started. It lays out the fundamental principles that are still the backbone of Bitcoin today. How transactions work, how proof of work secures the network, and how decentralized systems can achieve consensus without a trusted third party. So whether you're technical or not, reading it is going to give you a deeper appreciation of how elegant and revolutionary this design really is. And the first sentence of this Bitcoin white paper is striking in its simplicity. Satoshi Nakamoto wrote, A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. This was the first sentence. It is all there in just one sentence. Satoshi captured the essence of what Bitcoin is and what makes it revolutionary. So think about it. For centuries, every form of money required some form of intermediary, a bank, a clearinghouse, payment processors. Every transaction depended on trust in a third party. But Bitcoin breaks that dependency. It lets you send value directly to another person anywhere in the world without asking permission, without worrying about frozen accounts, without trusting a single centralized authority. So this one line is the DNA of Bitcoin and the foundation of everything that follows in the white paper. So to wrap it up in this episode, let's bring it all together by answering the question, what is Bitcoin? So at its core, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It's digital money secured by cryptography. And we're going to get into what cryptography really means. It's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which means you can send value directly to someone else anywhere in the world without needing a bank or a payment processor. It runs on a decentralized network. There is no company, there is no government, there's no single person or CEO that controls it. That's what also makes it so resilient. It's a scarce digital asset. Only 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist, giving it properties similar to gold. Again, that's why a lot of people call it digital gold. And finally, it operates on a transaction-based system called the UTXO model. Unlike a bank account where you hold a balance that's managed by a bank, in Bitcoin, you control specific spendable outputs secured and validated by your own digital signatures. And we're going to get into all this topic of transaction mechanics in far more detail. So this is the foundation. So in just a few lines, you can see why Bitcoin is unlike anything that came before it. It's money reimagined for a digital borderless world. So in our next episode, we're going to continue to dive under the hood, so stay tuned. And if you learned something or anything new today, I would truly appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and support my channel. I am looking forward to growing with you together. And if you have specific questions about Bitcoin, chances are many others have the same exact question. So let me know. It can be the context for a future episode. So with that, let's get after it.